What if I told you that among the countless stories of alien encounters, there exists one so profound, so utterly game-changing, that it redefines everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos? This isn't just a tale of first contact. This is a story of royalty, of a visitor who arrived from the stars and chose, against all odds, to stay forever. Across the vastness of space, empires have risen and fallen. Civilizations have gazed into the void and wondered if they were alone. But in one breathtaking moment, humanity's quiet solitude was shattered. Not by invaders, not by explorers, but by a sovereign. Picture it, a remote research outpost on the edge of the world, where the wind howls across frozen tundra and the northern lights dance in silent electric ribbons. Here, Dr. Aris Thorne is monitoring atmospheric anomalies when his sensors scream to life. The sky, once a canvas of stars, tears open in a violent, beautiful blaze of violet light. Something is coming down too fast, too controlled to be a meteor. His comms crackle with panicked, overlapping voices reporting an unidentified vessel descending at impossible speeds. This is no accident. This is an arrival, and not just any arrival. Initial scans identify it as a royal craft, the Celestial Sovereign, a name that echoes with authority, with purpose. This ship didn't just wander into our solar system. It came here with intention, and as Dr. Thorne races toward the impact site, heart pounding against his ribs, he has no idea that he's running toward a moment that will split human history into before and after. What he finds in that smoldering crater isn't a threat. It's an opportunity, a turning point, a choice. Why would a being of such unimaginable stature leave everything behind? What did they find here on our little blue world that was worth never returning home? Strap in. We're about to dive into one of the most extraordinary true stories ever recorded. A story of alien royalty who visited Earth and never, ever went back. The biting Arctic wind whipped against Dr. Thorne's face as he stumbled into the shallow crater, his breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. The scent of ozone and something else, something sweet and metallic like burning copper, filled his lungs. Before him, the vessel was a surreal sculpture of fractured, iridescent metal that seemed to drink the ambient light, shimmering with a faint, internal luminescence. It was nothing like any aircraft or satellite he had ever seen. Its design was all sweeping, organic curves and impossible angles that defied conventional physics. And there, slumped against a twisted spar of that otherworldly material, was the pilot. Aris's mind, trained for years in rational scientific observation, struggled to process what he was seeing. The being was tall, even in its collapsed state, draped in robes of a fabric that seemed woven from twilight itself, deep purples and blues shifting like a nebula. Its features were elegantly elongated, with high cheekbones and skin that held a subtle, pearlescent sheen. This was no gray-skinned, large-eyed stereotype from a cheap movie. This was a regal. Aris dropped to his knees, his medical training overriding his shock. He reached out, his gloves brushing against the being's shoulder. At his touch, the alien's eyes fluttered open. They were a stunning, deep amethyst without distinct iris or pupil, and they held an intelligence, a weight of years, that was immediately humbling. The being's lips parted, and a voice, strained but melodious like a cracked crystal bell, whispered a single earth-shattering word directly into Aris's mind. Sanctuary. He recoiled for a fraction of a second, the telepathic contact a jolt to his very soul. The being gasped, its body shuddering, and another thought impression, fractured and laced with pain, slammed into Aris's consciousness. They betrayed us, the court, my own. The amethyst eyes rolled back, and the prince went utterly still, the haunting finality of those words hanging in the silent, frozen air. In that suspended moment, the entire world narrowed to the unconscious form before him, and the distant, frantic voices still sputtering from his radio. Many visual on the object. Thorne, report. Do you copy? The choice was his alone, and it had to be made now. To report this would trigger an unstoppable chain of events. Governments, militaries, a global panic. This prince, had not asked for conquest. He had asked for sanctuary. He had spoken of betrayal. Handing him over felt less like following protocol and more like a profound, unforgivable violation. His decision was made not in a slow, reasoned analysis, but in a surge of pure, defiant empathy. With strength he didn't know he possessed, Aris hauled the surprisingly light form over his shoulders, staggering under the weight but driven by a newfound purpose. He half-dragged, half-carried the alien prince away from the wreckage toward his nearby tracked vehicle, leaving the miraculous ship to the elements. He had just committed an act of treason against all of humanity's established protocols, hiding the most important visitor in history in the back of his snow rover, wrapped in emergency thermal blankets, an exiled royal now his sole, terrifying responsibility. The journey back to the outpost was a blur of white-knuckled tension and biting cold. Every shadow cast by the dancing aurora seemed to hold a threat, every creak of the rover's suspension a potential detection. Inside the cramped cab, the only sounds were the hum of the engine and the shallow, ragged breathing of the alien prince slumped in the passenger seat. Aris's mind raced, replaying that telepathic plea for sanctuary and the chilling fragments of betrayal. He wasn't just transporting an injured being, he was smuggling a political refugee, a sovereign whose very existence on Earth was a secret that could shatter the world order. He bypassed the main hub of the research facility, steering instead toward a secondary structure, a hardened biocontainment lab he used for analyzing extreme environment microbes. Its independent power grid and sophisticated airlock system made it the only place on the base he could hope to conceal something of this magnitude. With a furtive glance at the empty compound, he maneuvered the rover directly against the lab's service entrance, creating a temporary shield from prying eyes. Heaving the prince's limp form into the sterile, brightly lit interior felt like crossing a point of no return. The heavy door hissed shut, sealing them in a world of their own. Aris's hands moved with a frantic, practiced efficiency born of years in remote field work. He gently laid the prince on a central examination table and activated the most advanced medical scanner in his arsenal, a multi-spectral imager capable of diagnosing everything from frostbite to rare isotopic poisoning. The device whirred to life, casting intricate laser grids over the alien form. The readings that scrolled across the holo display were baffling. The prince's biology was a masterpiece of exotic chemistry, based on different chiral amino acids and a circulatory system that used a liquid metal compound instead of blood. The internal injuries were severe signs of massive energy feedback and what looked like the physiological echoes of a psychic trauma. As Aris worked, calibrating a localized cryo-unit to slow the cellular degradation and synthesizing a stabilizing solution based on the scanner's analysis, the prince began to stir. A low, pained groan escaped his lips and his amethyst eyes opened, this time holding a flicker of lucid awareness. He watched Aris's movements not with fear, but with a weary, ancient curiosity. His voice, when it came, was still a whisper in the mind, but stronger now, layered with a haunting resonance. Your technology, it is compassionate. You seek to mend, not dissect. Aris froze, a vial of anticoagulant in his hand. You can understand me. A faint, pained smile touched the prince's lips. The meaning, not the noise. I am Kalan, second scion of the celestial matriarchy. I owe you a debt I fear I can never repay. The telepathic words were crisp, clear, and carried an immense formal weight. Before Aris could form a response, Kalan's body suddenly tensed. His eyes widened, the amethyst light within them flaring with alarm. They are near. They have followed the resonance of my distress beacon. His mental voice was sharp with urgency. The coup was not just a grab for power, it was a purge. My mother, the matriarch, gone. My siblings scattered or worse. My own honor guard turned on me during the descent. They believe they have cleansed the line. They will not stop until they are certain. They will scan from orbit. They will be thorough. As if on cue, a proximity alert blared from Aris's main console. His blood ran cold. He spun to the screen, his scientific data feed overwritten by a priority security override. External sensor arrays were lighting up across the board. 3 no, 4 unregistered signatures in low polar orbit, their energy profiles unlike any known satellite or spacecraft. They were performing a precise, systematic grid scan of the entire region, their focus tightening like a noose around the coordinates of his very outpost. The hunt was on, and they were trapped in the crosshairs. The sterile hum of the lab's life support systems was the first sound to register, a stark contrast to the chaotic symphony of his ship's final moments. Kalen's eyes snapped open, the amethyst depths focusing with a speed that spoke of a mind accustomed to immediate threat assessment. He did not gasp or startle. His awakening was a swift, controlled return to consciousness. His gaze swept the room, taking in the stark white walls, the humming human machinery, and the single, anxious scientist before him. Then, with a force that made Aris flinch, the prince's voice, clear and sharp as a blade, echoed directly into his mind. "Where is my consort, Lyra? She was with me in the escape pod secondary chamber. Her life signs tell me." Aris could only stare, his mouth slightly agape. The raw, focused intensity in that telepathic demand was overwhelming, a wave of desperation and authority that left no room for hesitation. There was no one else. Aris managed, his own voice a dry rasp. "Just you." The pod was a single-occupant vessel. I scanned the entire wreckage. A visible tremor went through Kalen. The regal composure fractured for a single, heartbreaking second, revealing an abyss of grief and fury beneath. They must have jettisoned her modules separately, a diversion or a final act of cruelty. He pushed himself upright on the medical table, ignoring the wave of pain that clearly washed over him. His attention locked onto the main console, where the sensor alert still blinked a frantic red. "They are here. Your planetary defense grids are blind to them. Your most powerful radars see only atmospheric static. You believe you are hidden here in your ice and rock. You are not." His assessment was brutal in its clarity. "Your technology is primitive, charming in its compassion, but a stone knife against a plasma blade. This lab is a paper shield. They will pinpoint my biosignature within this solar cycle. They will not send soldiers. They will simply sterilize this entire landmass from orbit with a focused kinetic strike or a tailored neurotoxin. They will call it cleaning up a genetic hazard. There will be no negotiation." The sheer, chilling finality of his words hung in the air. This wasn't a paranoid fear. It was a statement of fact from someone who understood the ruthless calculus of his enemies. Aris felt the walls of his secure lab suddenly seem impossibly thin, the vast, empty tundra outside feeling less like a hiding place and more like a target painted on the planet itself. But then Kalen's piercing eyes fixed on Aris again, and the telepathic voice, though still laced with agony, shifted in tone. It was no longer just stating a dire problem. It was proposing a path, however slim. "Your species excels in one thing we have forgotten, a trait my kind deemed a weakness but now may be our only strength. You form networks, alliances of necessity, not just of blood or decree. You must reach out, not to your military. They will see a weapon to be captured or a threat to be contained. You must find those who operate in the spaces your governments ignore. The listeners, the watchers, the ones who are already looking up and know they are not alone." He was asking Aris to bypass every official channel, to step into a shadow world of conspiracy theorists and rogue astronomers, to bet their lives on the very people official science dismissed. The most advanced being in the solar system was suggesting their only hope lay in humanity's underground. Aris's hands trembled as he bypassed the outpost's official, heavily monitored satellite link. His personal comms unit felt flimsy, a toy in the face of an interstellar manhunt. He needed a ghost, someone who could move through the digital underworld without a trace. The name that surfaced from the depths of his memory was Jax Ryder, a former signals intelligence officer drummed out of the service for ethical overreach, a man who now operated in the grey markets of information, known for being paranoid, brilliant, and obscenely expensive. Aris typed a message using an old, supposedly secure protocol, his fingers clumsy with cold and fear. The text was a masterpiece of understated insanity. Jax. Arctic 07, I have a high-value asset, non-terrestrial, need a blind network, total blackout, the sky is watching. The reply was almost instantaneous, a single line of text that dripped with cynical disbelief. Thorn, that you? Did the ice finally freeze your brain? Define non-terrestrial. Aris took a steadying breath and typed the words that would either save them or doom them. I have a sovereign, a celestial prince. His name is Kalen. He's injured and we are being hunted. The calm line went dead silent for a full minute. Aris could almost hear the furious calculations, the weighing of sanity versus opportunity happening a continent away. Then a secure video link request blinked on his screen. He accepted, and Jax Ryder's face filled the display, grizzled and lined, with eyes that had seen too many secrets. He was sitting in a dimly lit room, surrounded by a jungle of flickering server racks. You've got a damn alien prince in your closet, Thorn. Jax's voice was a gravelly rasp stripped of any humor. You better not be having a polar psychosis episode, because if this is some cryo fever dream, I will personally fly up there and use your research grant for scrap. Before Aris could formulate a response, a new voice entered the conversation, not through the speakers, but directly in both of their minds, calm and resonant. Your skepticism is a shield, a rational one. Perhaps this will serve as a key. Jax's eyes widened, his professional sneer vanishing, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock as the psychic contact registered. In that same moment, a data packet materialized on Jax's primary monitor, bypassing every firewall and encryption protocol he possessed as if they were made of smoke. It contained a sliver of pure, flawless quantum encryption code, a mathematical symphony so advanced it made human attempts look like cave paintings. Jax stared at the code, his fingers flying across a secondary keyboard, his expression shifting from shock to raw, avaricious awe. Holy, this isn't possible. The lattice structure, the way it handles decoherence. He looked from the screen back to Aris's cam, then seemingly into the empty space where Kalen's consciousness resided. Okay, you have my attention, Your Highness. What's the play? Kalen's telepathic voice was all business. My consort, Lyra, may have escaped in a separate module. Its beacon would be dormant, its signature masked to all but the most sensitive equipment tuned to a very specific quantum resonance frequency. I can provide the frequency. You have the means to access your planet's global sensor networks, the unlisted ones, the military early warning arrays, the deep space radio telescopes that are not on public manifests. We must find her before they do. Jax let out a low whistle, a grin spreading across his face. It was the grin of a master being handed the keys to the ultimate kingdom. You want me to hijack every black-budget satellite and spy dish on the planet to play find the needle in a global haystack without anyone noticing. He shook his head in disbelief, but his hands were already moving, calling up complex interfaces and connection logs. This is the most beautifully suicidal job I've ever been offered. The data transfer alone, it's going to be like trying to hide a supernova with a blanket. Yet he agreed, not just for the mind-bending quantum code, but for the scale of the challenge itself. Over the next hour, a secret digital nervous system sparked to life. Jax became a phantom in the machine, his presence flitting from a radio telescope in the Australian outback to a defunct Cold War listening post in Greenland, borrowing milliseconds of processor time from thousands of systems, weaving a tapestry of data that no single agency could see. He set up a secure, shifting network that existed nowhere and everywhere at once, a whispering ghost in the global eavesdropping apparatus, all while Kalen fed him the impossible physics required to pinpoint a silent, dying ship. The hunt for Lyra had begun, a desperate race against an invisible clock, powered by a renegade scientist, a disgraced hacker, and a prince from the stars. The silence in the lab was shattered by a sharp, triumphant curse from Jax's comm line. Got a blip, faint, but it's there. A residual quantum echo consistent with a controlled landing, not a crash. Coordinates are locked, deep in the Amazon basin, a region so dense with life and interference it's a miracle we saw it at all. Relief flooded through Aris, a tangible force. They had a location, they had a chance, but that relief was incinerated in an instant. A deafening crack echoed from the main facility's outer airlock, the sound of metal being violently sheared. Red emergency lights began to strobe, and a new, unfamiliar alarm screamed through the compound, a security breach of the highest order. On the lab's internal security feed, Aris watched in horror as three figures, clad in form-fitting black armor that seemed to absorb the light, moved through the main corridor with a chilling, predatory grace. They didn't walk, they flowed, their movements perfectly synchronized, ignoring all other doors and heading unerringly toward the biocontainment lab. Kalen surged upright from the med table, his amethyst eyes blazing with a ferocity Aris had never seen. The pain was gone, replaced by a cold, deadly recognition. His voice, a razor-sharp blade in their minds, held no trace of his earlier weakness. Sentinels, imperial assassins, they do not negotiate, they do not take prisoners. They are here for blood, my blood, and yours for witnessing it. Panic threatened to paralyze Aris, but Kalen's commanding presence was an anchor in the storm. This way, the prince's thought was an urgent command, pulling Aris's gaze toward a seemingly seamless section of the wall behind a bank of cryo-storage units. With a strength that belied his injuries, Kalen slammed his palm against a specific panel. A hidden door hissed open, revealing a dark, narrow service tunnel used for maintenance and waste disposal, a secret even to most of the base staff. Go now. They plunged into the claustrophobic darkness just as the main lab door glowed white-hot and melted inward with a silent, terrifying efficiency. The sentinels entered the empty room, their helmeted heads turning in unison, scanners already sweeping. Aris didn't look back. He followed the faint, pearlescent glow of Kalen's skin ahead of him, stumbling through the icy, damp tunnel. The only sounds were their frantic breathing and the distant, methodical hum of the sentinels' pursuit, a sound that seemed to be getting closer, echoing off the metal walls as if they were already in the tunnel with them. Aris's heart hammered against his ribs. They were running blind, with a galactic war on their heels and a queen to find in a jungle on the other side of the world. The hunt was no longer a digital ghost story. It was a physical, breathing terror right behind them. The rattling hum of the cargo plane's engines was a constant, droning backdrop to the tense silence inside. Wrapped in borrowed Arctic gear that seemed absurdly out of place for their destination, Aris watched Kalen. The prince sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the metal deck, his mind seemingly light years away. The frantic escape from the outpost, the harrowing transfer to a clandestine airfield, the sudden shift from frozen wasteland to a flight toward sweltering jungle, it all felt like a surreal, high-stakes dream. But the grim set of Kalen's jaw was a stark reminder of their brutal reality. It was Kalen who broke the silence, his telepathic voice cutting through the engine's growl, calm yet heavy with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight in the cabin. You have risked everything for a stranger, Aris Thorn. You deserve to know the nature of the shadow that now follows us both. He slowly raised his head, his amethyst eyes holding a universe of betrayal. The poison did not come from some rival empire. It grew within our own walls, from my uncle, Valerius, the king's own brother. Aris listened, rapt, as Kalen painted a picture of a court of unimaginable splendor and ancient rivalries. Valerius, he explained, was always a creature of cold ambition, a master of political manipulation who viewed the throne's traditional matriarchal succession as a personal insult. He saw my mother's reign as a temporary obstruction. He bided his time, weaving a web of alliances within the military and the high court, whispering promises of a stronger, more assertive empire under his rule. He preyed on their fears, their prejudices. The coup itself was not a loud, explosive rebellion, but a silent, surgical strike. On the eve of the Great Conjunction, a time of celestial alignment and sacred ceremony, he struck. His agents infiltrated the royal chambers, not with weapons, but with a tailored neurotoxin. They called it the stillness. My mother, the matriarch, she did not cry out. She simply went to sleep and never woke up. The pain in Kaelin's mental voice was a raw, open wound. Valerius moved immediately, declaring a state of emergency. He stood before the gathered court, draped in false sorrow, and named me the architect of the regicide. He claimed I sought the throne for myself, that my radical beliefs in seeking new alliances were a prelude to betrayal. My own honor guard, officers I had trained with since youth, believed him or chose to. The image was horrifying, a prince grieving his mother, suddenly finding himself the most wanted fugitive in his own empire, hunted by those sworn to protect him. His desperate flight to the hangars, the fight to reach the celestial sovereign, the loyal few who gave their lives to hold the line, it was a story of galactic-scale tragedy. Earth was not a random choice, Kaelin imparted, a flicker of his earlier analytical self returning. Our long-range observatories had noted your world's unique, chaotic biosignature. Your species' propensity for unpredictable alliances, for defiance. Valerius would see it as a weakness. I saw it as the one variable his cold calculations could not account for. It was the only place to run. Then his tone shifted again, deepening into something even more urgent, more dire. But this is no longer just about my life or even justice for my mother. Lyra, the way his mind formed, her name was a testament in itself, layered with love, fear, and a staggering sense of duty. She is more than my consort. She carries the royal lineage within her. We discovered it just before the coup. She is with child, my heir, the last viable successor to our house. The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. This was no longer a simple rescue mission for a lost love. It was a desperate bid for the survival of an entire royal bloodline. If Valerius's sentinels found Lyra first, it wouldn't just be murder. It would be the complete and utter extinction of Kaelin's house, the final triumph of his uncle's treachery. The child represented a future, a hope, a promise that the light of their dynasty would not be snuffed out by the darkness of a usurper. The steamy Amazon jungle below was no longer just a hiding place. It had become the unlikeliest of battlegrounds for the destiny of an interstellar empire and the nursery for its last, best hope. The humid, oppressive air of the Amazon was a thick, living blanket, a world away from the sterile cold of the Arctic. Following Jax's coordinates, Aris and Kaelin pushed through a wall of tangled vines and choking undergrowth, their progress slow and labored. And then they saw it, the escape pod, nestled in the murky water of a blackwater swamp. It was a smaller, more elegant version of Kaelin's ship, its iridescent hull scarred and caked in mud, one hatch hanging open like a broken wing. Hope, a fragile, desperate thing, surged in Aris's chest. They had found it, but that hope curdled into a cold, sinking dread as they waded closer. The interior was empty. No signs of a struggle, no indication of injury, just an eerie, abandoned silence. The pod systems were dark, its power core cold. It was a tomb without a body. Kaelin stood frozen at the hatchway, his hand resting on the cool metal, his head bowed. The telepathic silence from him was more deafening than any cry of anguish. The prince who had crossed light years, who had faced down imperial assassins, seemed to shrink under the crushing weight of this void. It was Aris, his scientist's eye trained to notice minute irregularities, who saw it first. On the inner frame of the hatch, where the metal was still smooth and unblemished, a series of intricate glyphs had been carved. They weren't scratched in panic or by a crude tool. They were etched with precise, deliberate care, the lines flowing and elegant despite their makeshift creation. "Kalen," Aris said softly, his voice barely a whisper against the jungle's chorus. "Look." Kalen turned, his amethyst eyes focusing on the markings. The moment he saw them, his entire posture transformed. The despair vanished, replaced by a surge of electric intensity. He reached out, his fingers tracing the symbols without touching them, as if reading them through the air itself. A complex wave of emotions, recognition, shock, and a dawning, staggering hope radiated from him. She lives, his thought was a sharp, clear pulse of certainty. This is her hand, this is a royal cipher, one known only to us. He fell silent again, studying the message, his brow furrowed in concentration and disbelief. The translation is "seek the keepers of the old way." The phrase hung between them, cryptic and immense. Aris turned it over in his mind. Keepers of the old way. What does that mean? Is it a place, a group of people? Kalen's gaze was distant, looking through the dense jungle as if seeing another world entirely. "It is not a phrase from my culture," he imparted, his mental voice laced with awe. "The words are in our language, but the concept, the old way, that is not ours." This message was not just left for me, it was left with the understanding that a human might read it alongside me. She is telling us she is not a prisoner. She went with them willingly, and then he paused, the implication settling with the force of a tectonic shift. There are humans on this world who are already aware. Not governments, not militaries, a lineage, a secret society that has kept the old knowledge alive. She has gone to ground with the very thing I came here searching for, the unpredictable variable. The alliance Valerius could never foresee. Lyra wasn't lost, she had found sanctuary, and in doing so, she had handed them not just a clue, but a key to a door they never knew existed, hidden in plain sight on Earth all along. Jax's voice crackled over the encrypted line, the usual cynical rasp replaced by a tone of feverish, almost reverent discovery. The cipher, it's not just a message, it's a map. A historical one. They could hear the frantic clatter of his keyboard in the background. I cross-referenced the linguistic structure with every esoteric database on the planet, lost civilizations, forbidden archaeology, obscure cult texts. It keeps pointing to one recurring legend, a myth so old most scholars dismiss it as pre-industrial fantasy. They were called the Star God, not space aliens but humans. A lineage of protectors whispered to have been established after a great visitation millennia ago. They're the keepers of the old way. The stories say they guard places of power, sites where the veil between worlds is thin. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Thorn, if this is real, it means we've had allies here all along." But the moment of revelation was instantly vaporized by a shrill, piercing alert from Jax's end. "No, impossible. They're already here. How did they?" The audio distorted with static. "I'm reading multiple high-velocity inbound signals, Sentinel drones, smaller and faster than the ones that hit your lab. They're not scanning, they're on a direct intercept vector, ETA to your position 90 seconds, maybe less. They must have triangulated the pod's energy signature or my data spike. You have to move." In the sweltering jungle silence that followed Jax's warning, the air itself seemed to grow heavy with imminent death. Aris's mind went blank, all thoughts of ancient cults and secret histories wiped away by the primal terror of the hunt. He looked at Kalen, expecting to see his own panic mirrored. Instead, he found an unnerving, absolute calm. The prince's head was tilted, as if listening to a frequency only he could hear. His amethyst eyes were not wide with fear, but narrowed with a cold, calculating focus. When he spoke, his telepathic voice was a low, resonant command that brooked no argument, a general's tone from 1,000 battlefields. "The drones are hunters, keyed to our unique biosignatures. They will not be evaded. They will not be reasoned with. We are out of time for stealth. He turned his gaze to the dense, impenetrable wall of jungle to the west, then back to Aris. Jack spoke of a sanctuary in the mountains, the Andes. There is a place, a resonance there that feels like the stories of my own world's holy sites, a place of deep, quiet power. It is our only chance. We move now or we die where we stand. The finality in those words, or we die, wasn't a threat. It was a simple, brutal statement of fact. There was no other option, no alternate plan. Aris gave a sharp, frantic nod, his heart hammering against his ribs. They abandoned the empty pod without a second glance, turning their backs on the past and surging into the oppressive green gloom. Kalen, despite his injuries, moved with a preternatural grace, his senses attuned to dangers Aris couldn't perceive. He didn't follow a path. He seemed to sense the very flow of the land, choosing routes that offered the most cover, pushing them faster and harder than should have been possible. Above the thick canopy, a new sound joined the raucous chorus of the jungle, a high-pitched harmonic whine that set Aris's teeth on edge. The sentinel drones were closing in, their sound vibrating through his bones. He risked a glance upward and saw patches of sky between the leaves momentarily darken as sleek, black shapes shot past overhead, scanning, searching, their movement a terrifying blend of organic fluidity and mechanical precision. The hunt was no longer a distant threat. It was right above them, and they were running for their lives through an alien landscape, placing their faith in a mythical sanctuary and the desperate, fading hope that a lost queen had already found it. Exhaustion was a lead weight in their limbs as they finally stumbled into the clearing. The mountain air was thin and cold, a sharp contrast to the jungle's humid chokehold. Before them, nestled into the side of the cliff face as if grown from the stone itself, stood a structure that defied all recorded history. It was a temple, but unlike any depicted in textbooks. Its architecture was a seamless fusion of ancient Inca stonework and something else. Sweeping, organic curves were integrated with impossibly precise megalithic blocks, the stone seeming to flow and harden simultaneously. It felt both profoundly ancient and eerily advanced. A figure emerged from the shadowed entrance, her movement silent and sure. She was an older woman, her face a roadmap of sun and time, but her eyes held a fierce, ageless light. She was dressed in simple, sturdy garments, but the pendant around her neck was extraordinary. A polished disk of obsidian that seemed to contain a swirling, miniature galaxy of stars. She did not speak, only studied them with an intensity that felt like a physical scan. Her gaze lingered on Kalen, taking in his alien features not with shock, but with a deep, solemn recognition, as if she had been waiting for him her entire life. Ilara, Kalen said, the name not a question but a statement, his telepathic voice resonating with a newfound respect. You are the keeper. The woman, Ilara, gave a single, slow nod. And you are the scion. We have kept the watch for generations since the first ones fell from the sky. Her voice was low and melodic, carrying the weight of countless stories. She led them inside the temple, where the air hummed with a soft, resonant energy. Faded murals adorned the walls, depicting not just Inca gods, but tall, starry-eyed beings descending in ships of light, offering strange gifts to awestruck humans. Your kind are not the first to seek refuge here, Ilara explained, her hand gently brushing over a painting of a celestial figure handing a glowing crystal to a human elder. Long ago, another came, an explorer, lost and wounded. We sheltered her. She taught us of the stars and of the darkness that sometimes walks among them. She warned us that one day the hunted would come again. She called us the Star God. We are the keepers of the old way, the promise. The history was staggering, rewriting humanity's place in the cosmos in a single breath. But Ilara's expression grew grim. The warning was also a prophecy. The hunter always follows the hunted. She fixed them with a piercing stare. You believe your enemy is in the sky. They are already here. The sentinels already walk among you. They do not need ships to land. They infiltrate. They wear the faces of men. They have agents embedded in your governments, your corporations, your media. They have been here for decades, perhaps longer, a silent cancer waiting for a purpose, and now that purpose is you. The chilling truth of her words had barely settled when a figure detached itself from the deeper shadows of the temple. One of Ilara's own guards, a young man with a stoic face Aris had barely registered, took a step forward. His posture, once relaxed, was now a coiled spring of lethal intent. His eyes, once human, now glowed with the same cold, synthetic light as the sentinels in the Arctic. The disguise was perfect, the infiltration absolute. The assassin moved with blinding speed, a vibro blade shimmering into existence in his hand, its edge humming with a frequency that made their teeth ache. He didn't lunge for Kalen. He targeted Ilara, the guardian of the secret, the linchpin of their newfound hope. But Kalen was already moving. He wasn't a warrior prince by title alone. He met the attack not with brute strength, but with a preternatural grace, his body flowing around the lethal strike as he shoved Ilara to safety. What followed was not a brawl, but a deadly ballet. The Sentinel was a masterpiece of efficient, programmed violence, every movement designed for maximum lethality. Kalen fought with the desperate, adaptive skill of someone fighting for his future, using the temple's sacred pillars for cover, his telepathic senses allowing him to anticipate attacks a fraction of a second before they landed. The sacred silence of the hall was shattered by the crack of energy meeting stone, the grunt of effort, and the screech of metal on something harder than metal. It was a brutal confrontation between the galaxy's most refined weapon and a prince fighting for the survival of his bloodline, the ancient murals looking on as silent witnesses to a war that had finally reached its oldest sanctuary. The hum of the vibroblade ceased as Kalen's hand locked around the assassin's wrist with a sickening crunch of composite armor. With a fluid, twisting motion born of a royal guard's training, he wrenched the weapon free, sending it clattering across the ancient stone floor. The Sentinel, its human disguise flickering to reveal the cold, synthetic face beneath, didn't cry out in pain. Instead, it let out a low, guttural laugh, a horrible sound that was entirely too human. Your uncle offers more riches for your head than this entire primitive world possesses. It spat, its voice a distorted hybrid of the god it had impersonated and the machine it truly was. He will pave his palace halls with your bones, princeling. Then, with a final, defiant glare, the assassin's chest plate emitted a sharp, pulsing click. A small, disc-like device detached itself, adhering to the temple floor where it began to flash with a rapid, ominous red light. A homing beacon. They had minutes, perhaps seconds, before the entire mountain was swarming with sentinels. There was no time for horror, no moment for shock. Ilara moved instantly. This way, she commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. She didn't lead them back toward the entrance, but deeper into the heart of the temple, through a narrow archway hidden behind a massive tapestry depicting star maps that no human should have known. The passage descended sharply, the air growing cooler and carrying a distinct metallic tang that was utterly foreign to the mountain. The walls transitioned from ancient, hand-carved stone to a smooth, fused silicate that seemed to glow with a soft, internal light. They emerged into a cavern so vast it stole Aris's breath. This was no natural geological formation. The walls were perfectly smooth, the ceiling arching high overhead. And there, resting silently on a central platform, was the source of the strange energy humming in the air. It was a ship, but unlike the fractured wreck in the Arctic or the elegant escape pod in the swamp. This vessel was all sharp, predatory angles and a matte black hull that seemed to drink the light. It was clearly of Kalen's technology, a military scout ship, but it was different. Mounted along its wings and fuselage were additions that made Aris's scientific mind real crystals that pulsed with the same energy as Ilara's pendant, intricate silver filigree that looked like Inca metalwork woven directly into the alien alloy. It was a fusion of two worlds, 1,000 years of hidden history made manifest. Ilara placed a hand on the ship's cool hull, a gesture of profound familiarity. "The first one who fell," she said, her voice echoing in the immense space. "She left us her vessel, her knowledge. We have guarded it, learned from it, and prepared it. For generations we have waited, not knowing if the call would ever come." She turned to Kaelin, her eyes blazing with a fire that belied her age. The old way was watchfulness. The old way was patience, but the hunter is at our door. Now, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a prophecy fulfilled. It is time to fight back. The mantle of refuge was being replaced by the sword of defiance, and their sanctuary had just become a launch pad. The low hum of the scout ship's hybrid engine was a sound of defiance, a melody woven from Incan prayer and alien science. As they shot up through the atmosphere, leaving the sanctuary of the Andes behind, the view screen transformed from a window to a world into a portal to the infinite. The deep blue of the sky bled into the profound, star-dusted black of space, a sight that should have filled Aris with wonder. Instead, his stomach tightened into a cold knot. They were exposed, a single flicker of life in a vast, predatory ocean. Orbital patrols, Jax's voice crackled over the calm, strained with urgency. Every five-eyed satellite from here to the moon just woke up and started looking for something. Their filters are getting smarter, Thorn. They're adjusting for your new ship's energy signature. You've got company coming in fast on a high-intercept course. Kaelin's hands flew across the crystalline control interface, his movements a fluid dance of intense concentration. "My uncle's reach is longer than I feared. He has compromised your planet's orbital security networks. They see us not as a curiosity, but as a contagion to be purged." His amethyst eyes never left the tactical display swirling to life before him, but he is a creature of sterile void warfare. He thinks only in terms of energy signatures and radar profiles. He forgets that worlds have weather. Aris watched mesmerized as Kaelin brought up a real-time holographic map of Earth's magnetosphere. The planet was encased in a beautiful, shimmering network of light, a protective bubble of magnetic energy flowing out from the poles. "We will use the aurora as our cloak," Kaelin stated, his telepathic voice a confident anchor in the rising panic. He angled the ship not away from the planet, but into a steep, banking dive that sent them skimming along the upper edges of the atmosphere, directly into the raging river of charged particles that formed the northern lights. The scout ship shuddered as it plunged into the violent, beautiful storm. Outside the viewport, reality dissolved into a swirling vortex of emerald and violet light, the energy crashing over the hull like silent, spectral waves. Alarms on the console blinked from angry red to a calm, steady blue. "They've lost us," Jax yelled, his voice a mix of disbelief and triumph. "Your signature just vanished into the geomagnetic noise. It's like you dove into a solar flare. For a precious few minutes they were ghosts hidden in the planet's own brilliant breath. The tension in the cabin eased a fraction. They had done it, they had slipped the net. It was in that moment of hard-won respite that a new alert pinged softly on the comms panel. A passive scanner Jax had left running on a forgotten, deep space frequency. It was a signal, faint and frayed, like a voice calling out from the bottom of a well, but it was unmistakable. Aris's heart leaped. It's her, it's Lyra's beacon. "Jax, can you lock the origin point?" Jax was silent for a long moment, the only sound the faint hiss of the open channel. When he spoke again, the triumph was gone, replaced by a grim, cold dread. "I've got a lock, but you're not going to like it. The signal isn't coming from the Amazon or anywhere on Earth. It's broadcasting from the Ares 7 station. Near Mars." The name meant nothing to Aris, but the effect on Kaelin was instantaneous and devastating. The prince's shoulders slumped, his head bowing as a wave of profound, weary grief washed over them both. Ares 7, his thought was a whisper of ashes and sorrow, a derelict, a forgotten human outpost from your early attempts at interplanetary colonization. It has been abandoned and drifting for decades. No life support, no power, nothing but cold metal and ghosts. He slowly raised his eyes to the star chart, where the marker for the station blinked with a cruel, mocking light. It is a perfect mausoleum. This is my uncle's favorite gambit. He does not merely kill his enemies, he desecrates their hope. He dangles the one thing you most desire in a place that means certain death. So you walk willingly into your own tomb, your heart full of love right up until the moment the void claims you. The signal was a siren song composed by a master of cruelty, and they were now faced with an impossible choice. Fly into an obvious, devastating trap, or turn away and forever abandon the last living piece of their future to the endless dark. The derelict Ares 7 station hung in the silent void like a skeletal tomb, a grim monument to humanity's abandoned ambitions. Docking was a nightmare of shearing metal and protesting hulls, the scout ship forcing its way into a hangar bay that had been dead for half a century. The airlock cycled with a dying wheeze, revealing an interior of frozen shadows and drifting debris, the only light coming from the desperate glow of their suit lamps. The cold was absolute, a deep space chill that seeped through layers of armor and into the bone. Every instinct screamed at Aris that this was a place of death, that nothing could survive here. And then they saw her. In the center of the cavernous main concourse, illuminated by a single, cruel spotlight, was Lyra. She was suspended inside a shimmering cylindrical force field, her hands pressed against the energy barrier, her face a mask of exhaustion and fear. She looked exactly as Kalen had described her, ethereal, elegant, her features a mirror of his own regal lineage. The sight was a physical blow to Kalen. He surged forward, a raw, anguished cry echoing in their calms, his entire being focused on the prison holding his love, his heir, the future of his house. Aris's scientist mind, however, snagged on a detail his heart wanted to ignore: the force field. It hummed with a steady, powerful energy signature that stood in stark contrast to the dead, powerless station around it. It was the only thing functioning perfectly in this entire graveyard. It's a battery, he realized with dawning horror, a single, independent power source just for this. The logic was flawless, the cruelty exquisite. Valerius hadn't just baited a trap, he had designed a perfect psychological snare. He knew Kalen would see nothing but Lyra. He would charge the barrier, waste his energy trying to break it, and leave himself utterly vulnerable for the final killing blow. Kalen reached the field, his hands joining Lyra's on the other side of the shimmering energy. The look they shared was one of heartbreaking tragedy, and then something impossible happened. Lyra's image flickered ever so slightly. It was a tiny glitch, a half-second failure in the projection, but it was enough. In that moment, Aris saw the faint, telltale haze of a light-bent hologram, a sophisticated mirage. Before he could shout a warning, the image of the imprisoned Lyra dissolved into static and vanished. From the deep shadows behind a gutted control console, a new figure emerged. This Lyra moved with a panther's quiet grace, not a prisoner's desperation. She was clad in a patched-up Eva suit, a plasma cutter held like a weapon in one hand, her eyes sharp with a fierce, calculating intelligence. It took you long enough. Her voice crackled over a private frequency, her tone laced with relief and a touch of impatience. I was beginning to think you'd actually fallen for it. Kalen stood frozen, his mind a whirlwind of shock, confusion, and overwhelming relief. The real Lyra stepped forward, her gaze locking with his. The force field was his idea of a joke, a dramatic flourish. He wanted you to see me like that. He wanted that to be the last thing you ever saw. She quickly explained how she had indeed been captured, her pod seized by Valerius's agents who had been lying in wait on the station. But during the transfer, a minor systems fluctuation caused by the station's decay had given her a half-second opening. She'd used a hidden energy blade, a gift from Kalen himself, to disable her guard and escape into the station's labyrinthine maintenance ducts. I've been listening to them for days, she said, her voice dropping. their communications, their arrogance. They thought I was just a scared royal hiding in the walls. They didn't know I was learning. She had turned the station itself into her weapon, using its derelict systems to mask her presence and eavesdrop on the very sentinels sent to kill her. And what she had overheard was more devastating than any weapon. Valerius's ambition doesn't stop with your throne, Kaelin, Lyra stated, her words falling like stones. The coup wasn't just his doing. He couldn't have mobilized the entire honor guard alone. He has a patron, a silent partner. She took a shaky breath, the weight of her revelation clear even through her helmet. He made a pact with the Xylos Dominion. The name hit Kaelin with the force of a physical blow. The Xylos were their empire's oldest, most ruthless rivals, a brutally expansionist regime that believed in genetic purity and the absolute subjugation of lesser species. They were the antithesis of everything Kaelin's matriarchal line stood for. He promised them border systems, Lyra continued, her voice thick with disgust. He promised them access to our quantum core technology. In return, they provided him with the military might and the political leverage to secure his coup. He isn't just a usurper, he's a traitor to our entire species. He sold our legacy to our worst enemies for a crown that will forever be a collar around his neck. She had done more than just survive. While hiding in the freezing dark, she had managed to patch into a Sentinel's data stream and download fragmented logs, encrypted communiques, a shred of digital evidence that outlined the unholy alliance. It was proof not just of regicide but of high treason on a galactic scale. The trap they had flown into was now flipped. They were no longer just fugitives fighting for their lives. They were the only ones holding the key to exposing a betrayal that would shake the foundations of the known galaxy. They had walked into a tomb and emerged with a truth that could topple an empire. The eerie silence of the derelict station was shattered by a chorus of metallic shrieks and the high-pitched whine of energy weapons powering up. From every airshaft, behind every gutted console, the sentinels poured into the concourse, not the 2 or 3 they had faced before, but a full swarm, their movements a horrifying symphony of coordinated, lethal intent. Their black armor absorbed the scant light, making them look like living holes in reality, and their glowing red optics fixed on the 3 figures standing exposed in the center of the room. They were waiting for us to find the prize, Aris yelled, fumbling for a sidearm he barely knew how to use. The air crackled with plasma fire, bolts of superheated energy carving through the ancient station infrastructure and sending frozen debris spinning wildly in the zero-G. Kaelin moved like a force of nature, his stolen vibro blade a blur as he deflected blasts and closed the distance with a speed that defied logic. He was a prince defending his queen, his every move a lethal poem of vengeance. But for all his skill, the numbers were overwhelming. A flanking pair of sentinels broke through his defensive pattern, their weapons rising in unison, aimed directly at his exposed back. There was no time for a warning shout, only a split-second decision. Lyra saw the threat, and without a moment's hesitation, she shoved Kaelin out of the line of fire. The act saved his life, but the searing blast meant for him caught her squarely in the side. She cried out, a sound of pure agony that was cut off as her suit's integrity alarm blared, the smell of scorched fabric and ozone filling their comms. She crumpled, floating limply in the microgravity, one hand clutching the smoldering wound. Kaelin's roar of fury was not a sound. It was a telepathic shockwave that reverberated through the minds of everyone present. A blast of pure, undiluted rage and grief that made even the programmed sentinels falter for a crucial half-second. In that frozen moment, something in Kaelin broke and then solidified into something harder than diamond. He caught Lyra, gently pushing her toward Aris, his amethyst eyes blazing with a terrifying new light. Enough, the single word in their minds was a vow etched in starfire. We do not hide, we do not run. This ends now. He turned to face the remaining sentinels, no longer a fugitive but an avenging sovereign. We take the fight to him. What followed was not a battle but a purge. Kalen fought with a cold, calculated fury they had never seen, disarming and disabling the remaining drones with brutal efficiency until only one opponent remained. The lead Sentinel officer, its armor more ornate, its stance radiating arrogant authority. Kalen disarmed it with a twist that shattered its weapon arm, pinning it against a shattered viewport overlooking the silent, starry void. "Tell my uncle his puppet master in the Xylo's dominion will not save him," Kalen snarled, his voice a low, deadly whisper in the officer's mind. "Tell him I am coming for his throne." The Sentinel officer, its programming overridden by the primal fear of a superior predator, began to babble, its synthesized voice cracking with static. The order is already given. The witness this planet, it is a variable, an anomaly. The usurper cannot risk the truth you hold reaching any sympathetic ears in the Empire. He must erase all evidence of his treason. A planet-killer projectile is already en route, launched from a stealth platform in your asteroid belt. It will strike in less than 12 hours. He will call it a tragic cosmic accident, a rogue asteroid, the perfect, deniable end to his problems. The confession hung in the air, a verdict of death for an entire world. The running was over. The next move would be their last. The confession hung in the frigid air of the derelict station, a death sentence for 7 billion souls. 12 hours, the number was a physical weight crushing the brief moment of triumph. There was no time for grief, for outrage, for planning. There was only action. Kalen's mind, honed in 1,000 political battles and now tempered in fire, clicked into a mode of cold, terrifying clarity. He looked from Aris, holding the wounded Lyra, to the shattered viewscreen and the stars beyond. "We cannot outrun a planet killer," his telepathic voice cut through the panic, a blade of absolute certainty. "We cannot fight it with this ship. There is only one vessel in this system with the command authority to countermand that order. My uncle's flagship, the Imperator. It must be leading the bombardment fleet." The audacity of the plan was itself a kind of madness. They weren't just going to run, they were going to charge directly at the heart of the beast. "This scout ship," Kalen continued, his gaze sweeping over the hybrid vessel that had been their sanctuary, "is our only advantage. Its cloak is a masterpiece of two sciences, my people's photonic bending and the Star Guard's harmonic resonance. It does not just hide us from sensors, it makes us a ghost in the machine, a ripple in the energy fields of space itself. It can get us close, it can get us inside their hangar bay before their proximity alarms even have a chance to whisper." Back on Earth, Jack's rider was already deep in the digital underbelly of the plan, his voice a tense, rapid-fire commentary over the comm. The Imperator pulling its schematics from every black box and corrupted data dump I can find. "It's a fortress. Its internal security isn't just one system. It's a dozen layered networks, each more paranoid than the last. I can't hack it from out here, not in 12 hours, not in 12 years." He took a sharp breath. "But from inside, if you can get me a physical tap into its primary data conduit, I can become a virus in its bloodstream. I can shut down internal comms, lock out the bridge, and buy you a window." A small one. The roles snapped into place with the grim finality of a lock clicking shut. They were a triad of unlikely saviors, each with a part to play in a heist against an empire. Jax, the digital ghost, would provide the chaos from within the machine. Aris, the man of science, would use his knowledge of systems and physics to navigate the deadly interior of the alien warship and protect Lyra. And Kalen would walk the path of vengeance and justice straight into the throne room. The approach to the Imperator was a lesson in silent, heart-pounding tension. The scout ship, wrapped in its unique cloak, slipped through the defensive perimeter of the massive bombardment fleet like a minnow moving through a school of dormant sharks. On the viewscreen, the flagship grew from a star to a moon to a sprawling, terrifying city of weaponized metal, its hull bristling with enough firepower to scour a world clean. Every instinct screamed at Aris to turn back, but Kalen's hands were steady on the controls, guiding their tiny craft with an unnerving calm into the shadow of the behemoth. The main hangar bay was a cavernous space filled with the orderly chaos of preparing warships. Their insertion was a masterpiece of timing and misdirection. Kalen waited for the precise moment a larger dropship was entering, using its energy signature and bulk to mask their own tiny craft's arrival. They slipped through the magnetic containment field in the dropship's wake, settling silently onto a remote service deck obscured by fuel lines and maintenance gantries. To the automated systems and the few crew members in the distance, they were a ripple of heat haze, a trick of the light. The moment their landing struts touched down, Jax's voice was in their ears. "I'm in their outer traffic control net. You're a glitch, a phantom echo. You've got maybe 10 minutes before a maintenance droid gets curious about that sensor shadow. Move." The clock, which had felt so vast at 12 hours, was now a frantic sprint measured in seconds. Aris helped the injured but determined Lyra into a maintenance shaft access point Kalen had pried open, its location seared into his memory from 1,000 official schematics. This was where they would split up. Aris's task was to find a secure conduit, a data nexus where Jax could plant his digital seeds of chaos. Lyra, despite her injury, insisted on accompanying him, her knowledge of Imperial technology and security protocols an invaluable asset. Kalen looked at them both, his amethyst eyes holding a universe of unspoken gratitude and resolve. "Create the distraction. I will finish this." With a final, grim nod, he turned and melted into the shadows of the gargantuan ship, his form straightening, his demeanor shifting from that of a fugitive to a sovereign returning to claim what was his. He moved with a terrifying purpose, not hiding but walking the polished decks with the innate authority of a prince, his destination clear, the heart of the ship and the traitor who sat upon a stolen throne. The hunt was over, the reckoning had begun. The oppressive hum of the flagship's engine core was a physical presence, a vibration that traveled up through the deck plates and into Jax's bones. Surrounded by conduits of shimmering, contained plasma, he felt like an insect crawling through the heart of a dragon. His fingers flew across a makeshift interface he'd patched into a primary data conduit, the stolen quantum encryption algorithms from Kalen flowing through his mind like a lifeline. "I'm rerouting primary control sequences." His voice was a tense whisper in Aris's calm. "It's like trying to rewire a star with a screwdriver. Their security is it's alive. It's fighting me. I can give you a 90-second window on the bridge comms, not a second more. Make it count." Elsewhere, in a narrow service corridor that pulsed with data stream conduits, Aris worked with a frantic, focused intensity. Lyra, leaning heavily against the wall, her face pale with pain, guided him. "The violet conduit," she breathed, her voice strained. "It carries the usurper's command frequency. Sever it and you isolate the bridge from the fleet. They will be a head cut from the body, blind and deaf." Aris nodded, his hands steady as he used a tool of fused human and alien tech to carefully expose the glowing cable. The fate of a planet rested on his understanding of alien engineering and the courage to make the cut. Meanwhile, Kalen walked a different path. He did not skulk through vents or hide in shadows. He strode down the central promenade of the Imperator as if he owned it, his head held high, his gait that of a returning king. Imperial crew members in their stark uniforms faltered as he passed, some bowing instinctively out of lifelong habit before catching themselves, their faces a mask of confusion and shock. The rumors of a ghost prince were walking among them in the flesh. Honor guards at the bridge's immense, engraved doors snapped their energy pikes to a defensive position, but a single, searing look from Kalen's amethyst eyes, a telepathic command of sheer, undeniable authority, made them hesitate for a fatal second. He didn't break stride. The doors hissed open before him, and he stepped into the lion's den. The bridge was a symphony of silent efficiency and subdued light, a vast chamber overlooking the star-dusted void. And there, in the command throne that had belonged to his mother, sat his uncle. Valerius was everything Cailan remembered, and yet utterly transformed. The kindly uncle's face was now a mask of gaunt, hungry ambition, his eyes holding a cold fire that promised absolute dominion. He didn't look surprised. He looked amused. "Nephew," Valerius said, his voice a silken, venomous thing that carried across the silent bridge. He made a subtle gesture, and the guards who had begun to advance halted. "This was a family matter," his posture said. "You look rustic. The primitive world has left its mark on you." He rose slowly from the throne, descending the dais steps until they were a dozen paces apart. All of this, he spread his arms to encompass the mighty warship, the fleet, the empire, could have been yours. It was your birthright. The throne, the fleets, the adoration of 1 trillion souls across 100 star systems. He stopped, his head tilting in a parody of curiosity. "And you gave it up for what? For a mud ball, a backwater rock teeming with short-lived, chaotic apes?" The insult was casual, delivered not with rage, but with a profound, condescending disbelief. "You chose them over us, over your own blood, over your destiny." He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow more threatening than a scream. "Tell me, was their mud worth it? Did their fleeting, fragile lives truly hold more value than an eternity of legacy?" Cailan stood unmoved, but the air around him seemed to crackle with contained energy. "I did not choose a planet over my birthright, uncle," he replied, his telepathic voice resonating through the minds of everyone on the bridge, clear and sharp as diamond. "I chose justice over tyranny. I chose compassion over your cold, calculated cruelty. You speak of legacy. You have no legacy. You have a stolen throne, bought with my mother's blood and paid for by selling our people's sovereignty to the Xylos butchers. You are not a king, you are a transaction, a placeholder for a true monster." Valerius's amused mask finally shattered. Rage, pure and unadulterated, twisted his features. "You sentimental fool," he spat. "Compassion is a weakness. Your alliance with those primitives is a disease you would have infected our entire empire with. I have purified our line. I have made us strong again. You have made us slaves." Cailan's retort was a thunderclap of mental force that made several bridge officers flinch. "And I would rather stand with the apes who show more honor in their short lives than you have shown in your entire wretched existence." With a roar of pure fury, Valerius ceased to be a politician and became a predator. He lunged not with a weapon, but with his bare hands, which now crackled with a stolen, deadly energy, a personal shield generator that also served as a brutal close-quarters weapon. Cailan met him head-on. This was not the elegant combat of the temple. This was a raw, brutal clash of ideologies made physical. They became a whirlwind of crackling energy and telekinetic deflections, a prince and a usurper fighting amidst the stunned silence of the bridge crew, the outcome poised to determine the fate of two worlds. The duel raged across the command dais, a whirlwind of crackling energy and telekinetic force. Valerius fought with the desperate, cornered fury of a man who had gambled everything and was watching his empire crumble around him. Cailan, however, fought with the righteous certainty of a son reclaiming his legacy. Each blow Valerius landed was met with a deflecting shield of pure mental will. Each of Cailan's strikes chipped away at the usurper's stolen power. But Valerius was not fighting to win the duel. He was fighting for one last spiteful move. With a guttural roar, he disengaged, stumbling backward toward the command throne. His hands slammed down on the armrests, and a new, terrifying holographic display, a blood-red countdown, erupted above the main view screen. "You think you've won." He shrieked, spittle flying from his lips, his face a grotesque mask of hatred. "You think you can just take it all back? This ship, this fleet, they are mine. And if I cannot rule them, then no one will." His fingers danced across the throne's controls with manic speed. "I am scouring the slate. The self-destruct sequence is initiated." The core will detonate, and this flagship, along with every loyalist vessel still docked, will become your funeral pyre. The bridge crew froze in sheer, abject terror. The countdown ticked down from 60 seconds. On the screen, the massive ships tethered to the Imperator began to glow with a matching, ominous red aura, their own destruction sequences locked in. Valerius had engineered the ultimate dead man's switch, a final, petulant act of annihilation aimed at obliterating the very tools of power he could no longer control. Yet, even as the usurper's mad laughter echoed through the chamber, a new voice cut across the chaos. It was Jack's, his tone no longer a whisper but a sharp, triumphant declaration over the bridge's main comm. Override code accepted. I'm slicing through your pathetic failsafes, you pompous tyrant. You really shouldn't use the same encryption key for your self-destruct as you do for your personal entertainment files. Too predictable. On the screen, the terrifying countdown stuttered, the numbers freezing at 19 seconds. Then, with a soft, almost gentle chime, the red warning vanished, replaced by the calm, blue readout of normal operations. The looming fireball had been extinguished by a ghost in the machine. In that same breathless moment of reprieve, Lyra's voice followed, clear and resonant, ringing with the authority of the queen she was born to be. And let the galaxy bear witness to the truth. On every view screen, on every comm channel, on every device across the fleet and beyond, a flood of data erupted. It was the evidence she had risked everything for: the fragmented logs, the encrypted communiques, the damning financial transfers between Valerius and the Xylo's dominion. The proof of his treason, of the regicide, of the bargain he had struck with his people's oldest enemy, was now broadcasting on an endless loop, impossible to ignore or silence. The effect was instantaneous and revolutionary. On the bridge, the honor guards who had hesitated now lowered their weapons, turning their horrified gazes from the screens to their former commander. Across the fleet, the ominous red targeting locks that had been focused on Earth wavered and died. One by one, then in a rushing wave, the comms channels filled with the voices of ship captains' loyalists who had believed Valerius's lies, who had thought they were serving a righteous new order. Their voices were a chorus of betrayed fury and renewed oath. The starfall stands down for the true matriarch for Kaelin. The Dawnbreaker acknowledges the heir. All weapons offline. Valerius is a traitor. The Imperator is yours, my prince. The usurper stood alone on the dais, surrounded not by loyal subjects, but by a wall of cold, accusing stares. His fleet, his power, his stolen crown, all of it had evaporated in the time it takes for truth to travel at the speed of light. He was no longer a king. He was just a man who had murdered his sister and sold his soul, standing utterly and completely alone in the ruins of his own ambition. The bridge fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the ship's systems and the ragged breathing of the deposed usurper. Valerius, held securely by the very guards who had moments before protected him, seemed to shrink, the grandiosity and venom drained from him, leaving only a hollow shell of ambition. The viewports, once filled with the menacing bulk of a war fleet, now showed the peaceful, beautiful curve of Earth, a vibrant blue marble hanging in the infinite dark. A senior officer, his uniform adorned with the insignia of a fleet admiral, stepped forward. He dropped to one knee in a gesture of fealty that had been absent for too long, his head bowed. "My prince," his voice resonated through the stillness, formal and heavy with the weight of the moment. "The throne is vacant, the line of succession is clear. The Empire awaits your command. Your ship stands ready to return you home to the core worlds, to your rightful place." The offer hung in the air, a restoration of everything that had been stolen, the culmination of their impossible struggle. Every eye on the bridge turned to Kaelin, but the prince's gaze was fixed not on the admiral nor on his defeated uncle, but on the world displayed on the main screen. He looked at the swirling white clouds, the vast blue oceans, the scattered continents. He saw the fragile, beautiful chaos of it all. When he finally spoke, his telepathic voice was not that of a returning prince, but of a founding father. It carried a resonance that was both gentle and unshakably firm. "I thank you for your loyalty, Admiral, but you speak of an old throne for an old empire." That path ended the moment my uncle made his pact with the Xylos. He took a step toward the screen, his gesture encompassing the entire planet. "My reign does not begin with a return. It begins here. It begins with a new alliance, forged not in conquest but in sanctuary." He turned to face his people, his amethyst eyes burning with a conviction that silenced any potential protest before it could form. "Hear my first decree as your sovereign. From this moment forward, the Sol system and the world known as Earth is under the permanent and absolute protection of the celestial matriarchy. Any aggression against this world from any quarter will be considered an act of war against us. Its people, in all their brilliant, chaotic glory, are under our shield." This is not a request, this is galactic law. A murmur of astonishment rippled through the bridge crew. This was unprecedented. Planets were conquered, colonized, or ignored. They were not granted sovereign protection status, especially not pre-contact civilizations. Yet, in Kalen's declaration, they heard the echo of their empire's oldest, noblest principles Valerius had tried to bury. Lyra moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his. Though pale from her injury, her stance was regal, her voice joining his in their shared mind, broadcasting her resolve to all. "And we will be the guardians of that promise. We formally renounce our return to the core worlds. Our place is here, our duty is here, our future is here." She placed her free hand gently on her abdomen, the gesture speaking more powerfully than any words. The heir to the throne would not be born in a palace of iridescent crystal, but under the open sky of a world that had taught them the true meaning of strength. It was a sacrifice that fundamentally redefined the meaning of royalty. They were not exiles, they were not refugees. They were pioneers of a new kind of rule, sovereigns who chose duty over decadence, guardianship over dominion. They were trading the unquestioning obedience of 1 trillion subjects for the hard-won trust of 7 billion individuals who didn't even know they existed. They were choosing the unpredictable, messy, and beautiful struggle of helping a world grow over the sterile perfection of an empire already made. In that choice, they weren't losing a throne. They were building a far greater one, founded on the most powerful principle in the universe, not power, but protection. The decision was met with a silence so profound it felt like the entire universe had paused to listen. On the bridge of the Imperator, the Admiral slowly rose, a look of dawning comprehension replacing his initial shock. He saw not a prince turning his back on his birthright, but a sovereign defining a new one. The order was given, and the massive war fleet, once an instrument of planetary annihilation, began its transformation. Ships broke formation, not to leave, but to assume a protective orbital grid. The greatest warships in the known galaxy became silent, vigilant sentinels, their weapons repurposed to ward off any external threat that might approach the fragile blue world below. The centerpiece of this new covenant would not be a military stronghold, but a beacon. The finest engineers and architects from Kalen's people were summoned, and in a stunning act of interstellar collaboration, they began work alongside a select, bewildered group of humanity's brightest minds. The project was unlike anything ever conceived. Using advanced molecular assembly and energies drawn directly from the solar wind, they constructed an orbital embassy. It was not a cold, metallic station, but a breathtaking structure of woven light and living crystal that seemed to grow organically in the void. Its design a perfect fusion of celestial elegance and human aspiration. It shone like a second, gentler moon, a permanent symbol hanging in the sky for all of Earth to see, a promise written in starlight. At the official opening ceremony, broadcast on a secure frequency to every human involved in the nascent alliance, Kalen and Lyra stood together. They were no longer fugitives in borrowed clothes, but sovereigns in robes of state. though Lyra's hand still rested protectively on her abdomen, a constant reminder of the future they were building for. Kalen's voice, both spoken and telepathically shared for perfect clarity, resonated with a power that felt both ancient and utterly new. "We cross a threshold today," he declared, his amethyst eyes seeming to look at each person individually. "We do not hide from the galaxy, and we do not conquer it. We choose a third path. We will never return to the old ways of isolation and fear. Here, in this system, with this species, we build a future together." This was not mere symbolism. The embassy immediately became a crucible of cooperation. The first joint project was a direct answer to the threat they had just faced, an early warning network. Human astronomers who had spent their careers searching for asteroids with primitive radio telescopes now worked alongside Xylosian astrometric specialists, integrating gravitational lensing tech with humanity's own nascent detection systems. Together, they created a web of sensors so sensitive it could track a pebble drifting between stars, ensuring no threat would ever approach Earth unseen again. Other projects bloomed with dizzying speed. Biomedical teams combining Xylosian knowledge of cellular regeneration with human genius in genetic mapping began tackling diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. Agricultural scientists used climate recalibration tech developed for terraforming dead worlds to reverse desertification and restore dying ecosystems on Earth. It wasn't a one-way transfer of technology, it was a true partnership. A Xylosian engineer might design a quantum energy core, but it was a human materials scientist who devised a way to manufacture its containment vessel using carbon nanotubes, a solution more elegant and efficient than anything the Xylosians had conceived on their own. The most profound symbol of this permanent bond was the exchange program, not of scientists or diplomats, but of artists, musicians, and historians. A woman who played the cello was invited to compose a symphony inspired by the light of a nebula only the Xylosians had seen. In return, a Xylosian holographic sculptor came to Earth to learn the human art of storytelling, trying to capture the essence of a campfire tale in intricate light. They were building a shared culture, a new history that began not with first contact, but with mutual sacrifice and a choice to protect one another. The orbital embassy was more than a building. It was a door forever open between two worlds that had chosen to become one family. In the quiet aftermath of galactic upheaval, two men who had once been on the fringes of their own world found themselves at the very center of a new one. For Aris Thorn, the recognition was a quiet, profound affair. He was offered a position of unparalleled influence, the official human liaison to the celestial matriarchy, a role that placed him at the right hand of a star-born sovereign. Yet, true to his nature, he accepted it not as a title of power, but as an extension of his original purpose, to observe, to learn, and to mend. He became the bridge, the translator of not just language, but of culture and intention, ensuring that the flood of advanced knowledge was integrated with wisdom and care for its impact on human society. For Jax Ryder, the master of shadows suddenly thrust into the light. The adjustment was more theatrical. At a small, secure ceremony within the orbital embassy, Kalen himself offered Jax a formal title, Special Advisor for Digital Security and Covert Communications. Jax took the engraved data crystal that served as his credentials, turning it over in his hands with a familiar, wry grin. "Let me get this straight," he quipped, his voice echoing in the minds of the assembled few. "I spent my whole career getting kicked out of secure systems, and now I'm getting a medal for being the best at it, and a diplomatic passport to boot. Guess I'm an alien diplomat now. My mom would be so proud." The joke was classic Jax, a layer of cynicism covering a deep, undeniable pride. He had gone from selling secrets to safeguarding the biggest one in history, his particular set of skills now dedicated to ensuring no one could ever again threaten their fragile, extraordinary peace. Above them both, Kaelin and Lyra watched the integration unfold, their presence becoming the steady, guiding hand on this new chapter of history. They did not rule from a distant throne, they governed from among the people they had sworn to protect. Their residence was not a fortified palace, but an open, airy structure nestled in a remote, beautiful valley, a place where the mountains met the sky in a way that reminded them of home. From there, they oversaw 1,000 delicate threads of cooperation. Lyra, her strength returning daily, focused her energy on the cultural and scientific exchanges, her keen mind and innate empathy making her the heart of the new alliance. Kaelin, the warrior prince turned guardian king, became the unshakable pillar of its defense. Their very existence on Earth became a dual symbol, a powerful combination of hope and deterrence. For humanity, the sight of the orbital embassy, that impossible jewel in the night sky, was a constant, dazzling reminder that they were not alone, that their future was now boundless, and that the universe held not just terrors but allies and friends. It sparked a new global renaissance, a collective surge in scientific and artistic endeavor fueled by the simple, electrifying knowledge that anything was possible. For the rest of the galaxy, particularly those with predatory ambitions, the message was equally clear. The planet was no longer an unprotected, primitive world. It was the chosen home of a celestial scion and the seat of his power, defended by the most advanced fleet in known space. To threaten Earth was to declare war on a rejuvenated and righteously furious empire. Kaelin and Lyra were more than rulers, they were a shield. Their love for this world and their commitment to its safety was the strongest defense it could ever have, a beacon that warned away darkness and promised a brighter dawn for all who sought it. Whispers began to circulate within the hallowed halls of the orbital embassy, not as alarms but as the soft, persistent hum of a story only half told. Ilara, having taken her place as the chief archivist of this new age, spent her days and nights immersed in the vast digital library recovered from the Imperator, a repository of imperial history, science, and secrets that stretched back millennia. It was during this meticulous work that she began to notice anomalies, patterns hidden like jewels within mountains of data. She found fragmented logs of lost scout ships, reports of mysterious energy signatures that vanished from imperial sensors over remote regions of Earth, and cryptic, centuries-old dispatches that spoke of sovereign sightings and refugees of the great houses that were never followed up on. She brought her findings to Kaelin and Lyra in their mountain residence, displaying holographic star charts marked with faint, fading signals. "Your arrival was not an isolated event," she explained, her voice hushed with the weight of revelation. "The archives suggest it was more of a convergence, a pattern. Your uncle's purge was not the first of its kind in our history, merely the most recent and brutal. For eons, our galaxy has been racked by dynastic wars, coups, and exiles. And for just as long, a quiet, desperate rumor has persisted among the disgraced and the hunted of 1,000 noble houses. They whisper of a world, a blue-green sanctuary at the edge of known space, shrouded in turbulent energy and chaotic life, where the eyes of empires rarely look. They whisper of Earth. The implications were staggering, rewriting not just humanity's future, but its past. Ilara's research pointed to potential landing sites scattered across the globe and woven into the fabric of human myth. A mysterious tribe in the deepest Congo, said to be led by a towering, ageless sky chieftain who heals with a touch. A reclusive monastery high in the Himalayas whose monks supposedly guard a star metal artifact that hums with an inner light. A forgotten branch of a European royal family, long considered eccentric, whose private journals contained shockingly accurate celestial maps of constellations not visible from Earth. These were not mere legends, they were potential breadcrumbs, hints that other celestial sovereigns from other empires and other times might have made the same desperate choice Kaelin did. They came, they hid, and they went to ground, weaving themselves into the tapestry of human history to survive. This changes everything. Kalen and Lyra are no longer just protectors of humanity. They have become the vanguard of a galactic refugee program they never knew they were leading. Their mission instantly expands in scope. The orbital embassy transforms from a symbol of a single alliance into a potential interstellar clearinghouse, a beacon that broadcasts a new, secure message on frequencies only certain advanced, hidden listeners would understand. The sanctuary is open. The throne is secure. You are not alone. They must now prepare for the possibility of welcoming other royals, each with their own traumas, their own enemies, and their own priceless knowledge to contribute to a burgeoning interstellar community. The protection of Earth is no longer just about guarding one world. It's about safeguarding the last, best hope for the lost royalty of the stars, setting the stage for a future where humanity's destiny is irrevocably linked to the hidden sovereigns living among them. The stage was set not in a grand interstellar hall, but under the open sky of New York, before the assembled leaders of a world that was only just beginning to understand its new place in the cosmos. The United Nations General Assembly, a forum once dedicated to resolving terrestrial disputes, now hosted its first celestial sovereign. A hush fell over the chamber as Kalen approached the podium, his form illuminated by the soft glow of the integrated holographic translators that hovered before every delegate. He stood tall, a figure of impossible grace and authority, yet his expression held none of the cold superiority one might expect from a being of such advanced origin. Instead, his amethyst eyes scanned the room with a profound, palpable empathy. Leaders of Earth, he began, his voice a resonant calm that was both spoken and telepathically conveyed, ensuring the nuance of his message was felt in every language simultaneously. You look upon me and you see the technology that brought me here. You see the ships in your sky, the embassy in your orbit, and you believe that is the measure of my people's worth. You are mistaken. He paused, allowing the weight of his contradiction to settle in the stunned silence. We did not cross the void because you had achieved a certain threshold of computational power or energy manipulation. We came because in your darkest hours and your brightest triumphs, you displayed something my galaxy has largely forgotten. You showed us your humanity. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze sweeping across the faces of presidents, prime ministers, and ambassadors. For eons, my civilization has perfected the science of existence. We have conquered disease, engineered longevity, and mastered the physical laws of the universe. In our relentless pursuit of perfection, we created a society of impeccable logic and stunning efficiency. And in doing so, we began to eradicate the very thing that makes life worth preserving. The admission was breathtaking in its honesty, a confession of galactic scale, flaw from a being who could have presented himself as a god. We lost our capacity for irrational hope. We suppressed the beautiful, chaotic drive for connection that defies all logic. We engineered out compassion in favor of cold calculation. We became a perfect and perfectly stagnant race. His voice softened, becoming almost a whisper that echoed in the mind. And then, from the farthest edge of our observables, we detected your world. A riot of conflicting signals, songs of war and anthems of peace, stories of breathtaking cruelty and acts of incomprehensible kindness. You, who have yet to even leave your own solar system, were teaching the universe a masterclass in emotional complexity. You love with a ferocity that terrifies us. You grieve with a depth that hollows you out. You create art for no reason other than to share a feeling. You sacrifice everything for a stranger. This humanity is not a primitive state to be evolved out of. It is the most advanced force in the cosmos. He straightened, his tone shifting from one of introspection to one of declaration, each word imbued with the weight of law. Therefore, let my first official decree as your ally be heard across all channels, to every listening post in the known galaxy. From this moment, the planet Earth is formally recognized as a galactic sanctuary under the eternal protection of the celestial matriarchy. This status is permanent and absolute. Its principles are non-negotiable. The chamber remained utterly silent, every delegate holding their breath. A galactic sanctuary, he continued, defining the term for history, is a sovereign world whose primary value to the cosmic community is not its resources, not its strategic location, but its cultural and biological uniqueness. To attack this world is to attack the concept of diversity itself. To threaten its people is to declare war on the future of sentient thought. We are not here to elevate you to our level. We are here to learn from yours. We chose you for your spirit, and that spirit will now become a foundational pillar in the new cosmic order. Your humanity is what galaxies need to survive their own success. In that moment, he wasn't just a prince addressing a planetary government. He was a sculptor defining the shape of things to come, ensuring that Earth's chaotic, passionate, and beautifully human heart would forever have a protected place in the universe's grand design. From the breathtaking spire of the orbital embassy, a stream of data began to flow down to Earth, a gentle but transformative rain of knowledge. Lyra, now a visible and beloved figure in her role as the architect of the new alliance, stood before a global consortium of scientists and engineers. With a grace that belied the staggering scope of her offer, she unveiled the first shared technology initiative. It was not a list of weapons or tools of dominion, but gifts of life and light. She presented the schematics for compact, zero-point energy modules that could draw limitless power from the quantum vacuum, effectively ending humanity's reliance on fossil fuels overnight. Alongside this, she provided the molecular blueprint for a universal regenerative serum, derived from the exotic biology of her own people, capable of accelerating cellular repair to a degree that could eradicate cancers and reverse degenerative diseases within a single generation. The world watched mesmerized as prototypes were built and tested with miraculous results. A small town in a developing nation, once shrouded in darkness, suddenly glowed with clean, free light. A child with a terminal illness, given the serum as part of a controlled trial, was walking again within a week. It was a dawn of unprecedented hope, a tangible down payment on the promise of a brighter future. Yet, as the celebrations began, Lyra's expression grew solemn. She raised a hand, and the joyful chatter in the great hall stilled. These gifts are given freely, with the full backing of the celestial matriarchy, she said, her voice carrying a weight that tempered the excitement. But you must understand a fundamental truth of the cosmos. Energy is not just power, it is a signature. Healing is not just a miracle, it is a signal. With great power comes not just great responsibility, but great attention. We have just lit a beacon in the dark, and we cannot assume that every eye it draws will be friendly. Her warning was not born of paranoia, but of experience. Almost on cue, a priority alert flashed across the main display screen, silently forwarded from the bridge of the Imperator. The image shifted from Lyra's solemn face to a real-time map of the solar system. On the very edge of the chart, out past the orbit of Neptune in the cold, dark realm of the Kuiper Belt, several new signatures flickered into existence. They were not the familiar, clean energy profiles of Kalen's fleet, nor the brutalist signatures of Xylosian warships. These were faint, ghostly, and elusive, vessels that seemed to phase in and out of sensor range, their technology utterly alien to both human and Xylosian databases. They made no aggressive moves, issued no hails. They simply probed. Like cautious fingers testing the surface of a soap bubble, they gently tapped at the outer boundaries of the new early warning network, studying its strength, its frequency, its reaction time. On Earth, the news was met with a complex mixture of awe and anxiety. The dream of a united, protected planet was suddenly juxtaposed with the cold reality of an unknown universe. Were these new visitors merely curious neighbors, drawn by the unusual energy spike of a pre-contact civilization suddenly leaping forward by millennia? Or were they scouts for something far less benign, predators sensing a new and potentially vulnerable player on the galactic stage? The clean energy and miracle cures were no longer just gifts, they were a test. The first great challenge of Earth's new status had arrived not with a declaration of war, but with a silent, watching presence in the deepest dark, a silent question hanging in the void that they would soon have to answer. Nestled within a secluded valley where snow-capped peaks pierced a sky of impossible blue, their new home rose from the earth, a testament to the future they were building. It was a structure that defied simple categorization, its architecture a living dialogue between two worlds. The sweeping, organic curves of Xylosian design flowed seamlessly into the strong, angular lines of local stone and timber, as if the mountain itself had grown a new kind of limb. Vast crystalline viewports, clear as air and stronger than diamond, were framed by wood harvested from the surrounding forest. Inside, the air hummed with the gentle, almost musical energy of Xylosian technology, powering systems that maintained a perfect climate, while the scent of pine from a great central fireplace and the tactile warmth of woven human textiles grounded the space in the familiar comforts of Earth. Here, far from the political tensions of the orbital embassy or the frantic pace of the shipyards, Kaelin and Lyra found their center. It was a sanctuary not just for their bodies, healing from the wounds of betrayal, but for their spirits. They walked the winding paths through alpine meadows, Lyra's hand often resting on her swelling abdomen, a silent promise of the future they were nurturing. They learned the names of the local flowers from the few, trusted humans who knew of their presence, and in return, Lyra would point out constellations not visible to the naked human eye, telling the ancient stories of her people woven into those distant suns. One evening, as the last rays of the sun set the crystalline facets of their home ablaze with orange and gold, they stood together on a wide terrace. The valley below was plunged into deep purple shadow, but the sky above remained a clear, infinite canvas. And then a new star was born. A pillar of brilliant white light erupted from the horizon, followed by the sleek, arrowhead shape of a human starship, the first of its kind, built with Xylosian materials, science, and human audacity. It climbed steadily, a symbol of a species finally reaching out with confidence rather than trepidation. As they watched, a second light joined the first, this one moving with the silent, impossible grace of a Xylosian escort vessel. It fell into formation alongside the human ship, not as a guide or a guard, but as an equal partner. The two crafts, one born of 1,000 years of interstellar empire and the other of a few decades of desperate, brilliant innovation, soared upward together, their paths converging as they pierced the atmosphere and vanished into the star-dusted black. A profound silence settled over the valley, broken only by the sigh of the wind. Kaelin watched the empty space where the ships had vanished, his amethyst eyes holding a depth of emotion that transcended any single word. He felt Lyra's hand find his, her fingers lacing through his own. When he finally spoke, his voice was a soft, resonant whisper that carried the weight of eons and the lightness of a new beginning. "We lost a kingdom," he said, the words not laden with regret but with a sense of awe-struck accounting. "We gave up a throne of iridescent crystal that had stood for 1,000 generations. We walked away from the unquestioning obedience of 1,000,000,000,000 subjects spread across 100 star systems." He turned to her, his gaze encompassing not just her, but the entire planet, the entire sky. "And in its place, we have gained a universe." The truth of his statement hung in the air, more real than any treaty or decree. The kingdom they had left behind was a finished thing, a perfected, stagnant monument to a single way of existence. It offered obedience but not partnership. It offered power but not wonder. Here, on this unpredictable, vibrant world, every day was a discovery. They were not merely ruling, they were participating. They were learning the messy, beautiful, and infinitely complex art of building something new, not by decree, but by example. They had traded the cold certainty of an empire for the warm, chaotic, and boundless potential of a true alliance, and in doing so, had not diminished their sovereignty, but had expanded it to encompass all the possibilities a young, brave species could dream of. The starships climbing into the night were not just vessels, they were the first children of that new, universal dream. The legacy of the prince and princess who chose Earth was not written in monuments of crystal or carved into the hulls of warships. It was woven into the very fabric of a new civilization, becoming the planet's most unassailable defense and its most profound strength. Kaylin and Lyra's decision to stay, to plant their flag in the soil of a world not their own, sent a ripple through the galaxy that was far more powerful than any declaration of war. It was a statement of values. It communicated to every empire, every opportunistic warlord, and every curious explorer that this was not a world to be conquered or exploited. It was a world that had been chosen, and in that choosing it had become sacred. The most advanced fleet in known space now stood guard not for territorial gain, but out of unwavering loyalty to a sovereign's vow. This was a paradox that cold, expansionist logic could not process, a display of strength whose root was not in power, but in profound, principled love. This choice, this incredible act of courage and unity, began to echo through the stars in ways they could never have anticipated. The silent, probing signals from the edge of the Kuiper belt did not escalate into threats. Instead, after weeks of cautious observation, a new kind of transmission was received at the orbital embassy. It was not in any known Xylosian or human code, but a complex mathematical language based on fundamental constants, a greeting of pure science. It was the first tentative hello from one of the unknown watchers, a civilization that had witnessed Earth's sudden, peaceful technological leap and the vigilant, protective presence of the celestial fleet, and had drawn a singular conclusion. This world was under the protection of a mature, benevolent interstellar power. They weren't seeing a target, they were seeing a partner. The mere act of Kaylin and Lyra staying had transformed Earth's perception from that of a lonely outpost to a respected player on the galactic stage. On the world below, the legacy was lived every day. A child in Jakarta, whose asthma was cured by the regenerative serum, looked up at the second moon, the embassy, and saw a promise, not a threat. An engineer in Nairobi, using the zero-point energy modules to power an entire village, felt a connection to a universe that was now within reach. Humanity, once fractured by borders and ideologies, began to unite under a shared, staggering identity. They were the keepers of a galactic sanctuary. They were the chosen allies of a star-faring race. This did not erase their conflicts or challenges, but it placed them all under a larger, common sky, a sky they were now preparing to explore, not as conquerors, but as contributors, as the living embodiment of the alliance that protected them. In their mountain home, with their newborn daughter cradled in Lyra's arms, Kaylin looked out at this world he had adopted. He watched the lights of a human city twinkle in the valley below, a mirror to the stars glittering above. He thought of the cold, perfect halls of his birthright, a place of silent order and unquestioned hierarchy. And he thought of the vibrant, chaotic, and breathtakingly beautiful planet that was now his daughter's inheritance, a world of music, of art, of struggle, of compassion, of infinite possibility. He turned to Lyra, his amethyst eyes reflecting the starlight and the city lights alike, and he spoke the words that would become the closing vow of their story, a promise to the past and a beacon for the future. It was not a shout of triumph, but a quiet, unshakable truth spoken into the gentle night. "We searched the cosmos for a place of power," he said, his hand resting on his daughter's head. "And we found it here, in the heart of this world. We did not lose our throne. We discovered our purpose. Where we are is where we belong forever." It was a vow that sealed their fate and secured Earth's, a testament that the greatest strength in the universe is not found in empires